I think South Africans are very familiar, very familiar with this country's history, and South Africans are largely linked to solidarity causes of marginalized people around the world. And South Africans particularly hold a strong and, in their minds, principled view of Israel and Palestine. That is South Africans. But as conflict resolution specialist Andre Vlok writes, and he mentioned it yesterday, he says global conflicts and valid protests are being hijacked for secondary agendas and goals. There's complex urban conflicts being manipulated by people and groups skilled in these identity conflicts. And the city management and law enforcement in general required to oppose and, I would say, protect these events where people can speak their mind. They're doing that without sufficient understanding and training. He says expect more of this in the next year. And what he means by secondary goals is, yes, there are examples, maybe very small, minor voices, but loud voices amplified on social media of race baiting, discrediting of local government, amplifying a variety of existing identity conflicts, and also personal self-identification by people. I feel the way I do, I protest the way I protest, I stand for what I stand because I internalize a self-identity to stand in solidarity or in opposition of a particular cause. I think that is the reality. As much as I can say a protest for Palestine or protest for Israel is completely valid in your framework, I think we are internalizing, and it's absolutely fine to internalize a particular identity. But we live in a country with South African laws. We live in a country with a South African constitution. Let me first add and how people do react, and have particularly reacted to a protest which was chaotic. Let's not beat around the bush. It was chaotic on Sea Point Prom yesterday. Also come with a history of spatial policing. That is also there. People who feel, and this is very much, I would think, a valid perception by many, that police are deployed to a particular area to protect a particular group or community. That's a valid perception that many people have, particularly black South Africans have, that just because I am here, you need greater policing. But we're governed by a South African law. We're governed by a South African constitution that protects everyone in their freedom of speech, gathering, and association, of course, within the bounds of the law, when it does not infringe on people's lives, their dignity, and does not amount to hate speech. We are protected by the South African Constitution to stand on a soapbox, speak my piece. If that does not incite, threaten, infringe on someone's dignity, you have the right to do so, and you have the right to do so without yourself being threatened or violence incited in your direction. But I don't think there was that necessarily in the latter part of this week, and I was absolutely buoyed with tens and tens and tens of thousands of people gathered in the CBD on Saturday and peacefully protested. They peacefully made their voices heard, and it absolutely looked beautiful. Yesterday, I had a little bit of a different experience, a little bit of a different thought. That a small group of people who feel that they wanted to pray for a particular cause, in this regard, they wanted to pray for Israel. And we can talk about that merits if you want to. But they had a right to do so. They had a right to gather and they had a right to associate. I don't know whether the counter-protests, and I think counter-protests are absolutely valid. A counter-protest is absolutely valid. You stand on your side of the road, you stand on that side of the road, and we can shout at each other from a safe distance. We can make our voices heard, and that is absolutely fine. But I did not necessarily see that yesterday in the Sea Point prom. So I'd like to know from you, and I have no interviews planned on this. I would like a call. I'd like a voice note. I'm not going to engage in text messages because I do not know your tone and intonation and what word you are stressing. So I'd like to hear your voice and maybe have a conversation on how South Africans in particular have internalized a personal identity, a personal connection to a geopolitical conflict based on their particular history, based on South Africa's particular history.